Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Leading Youth, where we are empowering young people all over the world with skills for life. The entire purpose of this podcast is to inspire, empower, and motivate young people to learn from bold young change makers that we introduce through this platform of our monthly masterclasses, recognizing young leaders doing exceptional things around the world. So today we have with us Ahana Banerjee for today's masterclass with the Leading Youth. Now, Ahana is a multi-achiever. She is a 25-year-old founder, Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree, as well as a powerhouse behind her startup 𝐘𝐨𝐮, which is a Y Combinator-backed skincare tech company. From studying physics at Imperial College in London to raising $1 million at venture funding and making waves in the beauty tech world, Ahana is proof that clarity, courage, and community can shape a world-class entrepreneur. So today we're going to delve into Ahana's journey, and for every young dreamer out there, budding entrepreneur, or simply someone looking for motivation, this episode is just for you. So welcome, Ahana, to the Leading Youth Masterclass. It's an absolute honor to have you here and finally catch up with you. So would you like to maybe quickly introduce yourself to our audience in 30 seconds?
Absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to be here chatting with you. And, just to reiterate, I think some of the key bits of the intro. So my name is Ahana, founder and CEO of 𝐘𝐨. I started the company in 2021 after years and years of struggling with my own skin issues. I suffered with severe cystic acne, and I never knew which products to use, if they were working or not. But at the time, when I started university in 2017, career-wise, I always thought that I wanted to pursue academia and become a physicist. So I studied physics at university, as you mentioned. And then, after lots of trial and error, I did internships in software engineering, investment banking, stumbled across startups in my third year. And that was a huge turning point for me in terms of sort of finding my purpose and my passion. It was the first job that I loved. And, I wanted to make it happen, but as a student, lacked capital. And to put it really crudely, who was going to pay rent if I didn't have some funding? And that just seemed completely alien to me as a student. But then again, long story short, although I'm sure we can probably dive into it, in 2021, when COVID hit, I found myself with a bit more free time going into my final year of uni, applied to about 200 funding opportunities, got 199 no's, but the one yes was from Y Combinator, and they ended up investing in 𝐘𝐨 when it was just a 4-day-old idea. And that funding is what enabled me to start this company at this stage of my career. I ended up leaving my master's program at Imperial, turning down my graduate jobs in finance, and started building the company full-time then.
Wow, and that's amazing and takes a lot of courage to do what you did. And that's exactly where I want to pick up from, because young people today, especially those thinking about making a career switch, whether that's in the jobs or with starting with their own idea, where they kind of get stuck is, I guess, building that courage and motivation to take that leap forward, not knowing if this will actually bring them the result that they are looking for. So maybe taking a few steps back, tell us, Ahana, did you always know that you wanted to be a founder? Where did it all start, and how did you build the courage yourself to go about this journey?
Yeah, well, I think the short answer is no. I didn't know I wanted to be a founder until the age of 20, as I mentioned. But what I did know was what my values were and what was important to me. And I think that actually played a large role in helping me make some of these, what in hindsight seemed like quite audacious, bold decisions. Felt kind of easy at the time because I was so, excuse the pun, clear on what I wanted at every stage, at every stage of my life. But no, I mean, just very briefly, I grew up across the UK, India, and Singapore. So I had a lot of varied experiences in my childhood. And when I lived in the UK, I went to an ordinary state school. When I moved to India, I went to my first international school. It was a completely different socioeconomic class. And again, to put it very crudely, I was experiencing a lot of privilege in India. But at the same time, it was the first time I was witnessing poverty like I'd never seen it before. And I think at that point, I realized I had been given many unfair advantages in life, and I felt that the biggest one was my education. And therefore, I felt a responsibility to use my education and do something useful with it and solve problems for people. And at the time, I thought, well, solving problems means innovation, and science, by definition, you're building new things and solving big problems, which is why I was so attracted to physics. And so that's how I thought I would have my impact. But when I got to university, I think, I'd considered my career very philosophically rather than practically. And so the more that I learned about academia, and also the more I realized how single-focused it was, I had all these other skills that I didn't feel I got to use in my physics degree, which was a very, very technical degree, the more I felt like I wasn't using all of my skills and all of my background, which is what actually led me to apply for all these internships. And so, I did the first internship in software engineering at an investment bank, and there were things that I liked about it, and there were things I didn't like about it. But it opened my eyes up into, okay, so what is banking like? What's this world of finance? And then I just applied for more internships. And I never, expected to get anything, but I viewed all of it as a learning opportunity. And so, I'd put in hundreds of applications, I'd get the one, opportunity. And, I learned something through every internship I did. And what I'd learned by the end of, doing the internships in these bigger companies was I'd learned a lot of professional skills, professional communication, resilience, being able to work late night. Banking is kind of known for its hours, things like that actually prepared me really well as an entrepreneur. But it was in my third year when I just had a random message on LinkedIn one day from somebody with a startup idea. And at this stage, I knew nothing about startups, no desire to do one of my own. But it was the first job where selfishly, I was learning more than I had ever learned before. And just coming back to that point about values, I knew that what I wanted from this stage of my career was to optimize for learning and for growth. And so doing a job for the first time where I was learning so much about everything. Some days I was writing code, some days I was pitching companies, some days I was running events, some days I was doing the strategy and planning. I couldn't believe that there was a job that let me do everything. But coming back to that impact point, it was also the first job that I could so directly see how that unfair advantage, how I was using my skills, my background, my education to help people. And, in that context, it was a student graduate recruitment startup. It was helping students like me get jobs. And I knew how hard that was. And so, I think that was really where the turning point happened, because I realized not only is there a career that allows me to learn everything about everything, but there's also a career that maximizes all of those unfair advantages I have and gives back in a way that's meaningful to me.
That's amazing. And I think that's the beauty of entrepreneurship as well, that it's not just about doing something that you are personally passionate about, but it's also about creating that impact and that ripple effect on the community that you're trying to serve. And I think, it definitely kind of ticks the boxes in that regard, and is a very fulfilling experience. And especially if you're open to learning, like you said, I think that's really, I guess, the most important sort of mindset to have as a young person, where you're trying to not just build our brand, but also build ourselves in the process through the skills that are relevant in our journey. So obviously you spoke a bit about, why you started Clear and how it all kind of came together with your degree, your skills and everything with your skin, and why you wanted to do what you did. But tell us a bit about, what was it like? Were you 21, 22 when you started with Clear?
21, yeah.
Yeah, and so what is it like as a young person at 21 and going out there seeking funding and trying to convince the investors? What's the reaction like? What is reality like at that age?
What do you think it's like?
Does anyone even, take us seriously? I guess that's the main challenge. Or what do you think?
Look, so yes, people did take me seriously. That's how I raised funding. There were the believers. I found them and I raised capital from them. I think it would be a disservice to say that you're not faced with additional challenges, especially when it comes to raising funding. I actually think that in many ways, being a young founder is an advantage. And one of my YC batchmates put this in perspective for me, because I was actually whining about, it's like investors, like I don't know anyone, I'm struggling to get meetings. And he said, true, you don't have kids, you don't have to do the school run, you don't have any more mouths to feed.
Yeah.
You literally have more hours in your day than I do. If we are equally talented, you can outwork me and you can beat me. And I think hearing that early on made me realize that, oh yeah, that's true. And I'm very fortunate. And I know not every young person is completely free of other responsibilities, but in general, you know, a lot of us young people, we don't yet have families, mortgages, things like that. We just have to take care of ourselves. And I think reframing it in my head that actually, you know, when it comes to my productivity, my youth is a superpower in some ways. Given the problem I'm solving as well, you know, my app appeals to a lot of young people. A big part of my job as a founder is doing user interviews, connecting with our community. Again, it's an advantage in many ways because I think I'm more approachable as a young founder. So I found who I am actually a massive advantage in building the company. The one place where I have to say I felt it was a disadvantage was raising capital. And the reason I say that is because what I found about raising capital is that it's a lot less meritocratic than I had hoped, in the sense that it's not just about who you know, but who you know helps. Having a very good network helps and can make it a lot easier if you already have access to large pools of capital. Whereas there might be some founders who have amazing ideas, even amazing execution abilities, but if you cannot unlock those connections, it will be very hard for you to raise. And on the flip side of that, you have some people that maybe should not be founders, they just have money, therefore they have the luxury of just trying something, it failing, try again. And so I think because of that, because I didn't realize how network driven it was, and up till that point, I was 21, I didn't know I was going to pursue this path. I hadn't been strategically networking with investors, and it was COVID, so I couldn't go to events and things like that. It was hard to get in front of investors. Now, what I will say is, I think being taken seriously, it's a difficult one, because I think that there will be you can't help the way that you are perceived initially, right? When somebody sees me for the very first time, if they have no idea who I am, what I've done, no context on the meeting, I actually get treated very, very differently versus if someone has heard the introduction that you gave me, for example. You know, so I have seen when I've walked into rooms with investors where I'm just another now 25-year-old girl, then a 21-year-old girl with a skincare app, versus when they know what the company's achievements are, what they know my personal backstory is. And that's the reality of I will be judged slightly differently as a young brown woman. And there's no getting around that. And I think it would be a disservice if I didn't acknowledge that doesn't add extra barriers in place, because it does. But the flip side of that is, you know, I think the only way to change the narrative and to get past this, and a lot of these are unconscious biases, is just to persevere. And then it comes back to, well, I've got more hours in the day. So yes, maybe for someone who's older or has a better network, it might take them 50 meetings to close their round. It took me 200 to raise that $1 million, but I was willing to go through it. I was willing to get that many more no's, shamelessly ask any founder, any investor I spoke to at the end of the meeting, who else do you know that might be interested in investing? I had to kind of get comfortable with the uncomfortable, but I was willing to do that because in the grand scheme of things, raising the capital was so important to me, because it meant either I have a company or I don't have a company, that I was willing to persevere. So, you know, and then in those situations, yes, the investors took me seriously because they realized I was,
of course,
extremely serious. And then when I look at it from that perspective again, I do think that as a young founder, it's a massive privilege, on the other hand, to be taken seriously by these investors. And yes, my funding round was a struggle, but in the end, in that first round, there were 36 investors on my cap table. Those were 36 people I met for the first time. And, you know, my company was very early stage when I fundraised. They were willing, after, you know, a lot of them a 30-minute meeting, to take that bet, to put their hard-earned money behind me. And what bigger privilege or sense of belief from other people can, or, you know, validation can you get from people at that career? It is a real privilege to even be in the position to have a company and to be asking investors for money at the age of 21.
Yeah, it's It's an amazing feat that you have accomplished, and congratulations once again. I think I feel so proud every time I read about your story or listen to you, because yeah, just talking about the challenges of a young person, I think obviously it's varied, it's different for different people depending on what you're building and what your idea is.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, to be able to, expose yourself to that opportunity, close the deal, and actually get that to work is where the real test is. So, yeah, I'm sure this is really inspiring for everyone tuning into the conversation. And maybe then tapping a bit more into some of the challenges that you mentioned, especially as a young South Asian woman in the UK, where you start at a young age with zero network and zero connections, and how important this capital is. So maybe tell us a bit about what exactly are those specific challenges as a young woman in tech and skincare, especially in this industry?
So I think actually with the whole tech and beauty, I remember very early in my founder journey, I was advised by an investor to stay away from anything beauty, wellness, lifestyle, because he said it would make it harder, because it would leave investors with the perception that I'm stood in my kitchen mixing lotions and potions and selling them, which is fine. And there's many businesses that do that. There's nothing wrong with it, but that's not what �CLEAR is. �CLEAR is ultimately a data business. We are a very tech heavy business. And I have to admit, I have seen it. I have seen sometimes when I introduce myself, I say, we're a beauty tech company. I see the eyes glaze over when I speak to many investors in particular. And so, and I think what I can extrapolate from that and what I have seen for a lot of female founders is, as founders, we solve problems. A lot of the time, female founders want to solve female problems. And �CLEAR also, we have some medical applications, which is why I've also done quite a bit of the work in the femtech space and spoken to a lot of femtech founders. We are solving problems for women, although men have skin too, so that's why I don't go too heavy on the femtech. But 90% of our user base is women, just organically.
Sense, yeah.
And, again, as humans, we have familiarity biases. And so when you are solving a problem that you understand well, you're probably going to be more interested. But that by definition means that if you're talking to somebody who has not experienced the problem you're solving, it's just going to be harder.
Yeah.
And I think that is, number one of the issues that female founders have is a lot of the times we are passionate about the problem we're solving because it's targeted towards women.
Yeah.
And so just on the familiarity bias alone, you're already going to lose some investors. The next step is around how you are perceived. I have been told by investors that I don't look like someone with a physics degree. I have had literal disbelief in, no, but how does your algorithm work? Who built the app? I know you're saying you, but was it the team in India? No. I sat there with my laptop, I opened a VS Code, and I wrote the code. And I've had to spell it out like that because there was, more than one investor that could not believe that I had actually built the app myself. I have interviewed candidates who've applied for a job at my company as a developer. They've come to the interview and they have said, oh, I thought this was the technical interview, not the HR interview. And I said, yeah, it is. Are you ready? And they were like, oh, but who's doing the interview?
Yeah.
I said, well, there's two people in the call, and needless to say, you're probably not going to get very far in this interview process. And it's interesting because actually our CTO, Charles, has the same degree as I do. So he also studied physics at Imperial. He's a couple of years older, so we never actually crossed paths at university. But on paper, we have the same technical qualification. He is a white man. Nobody has once entered a room with him and been shocked and horrified that he can write code. And so it's things like this where, especially as somebody who does have an academic background, and, I think to a large extent, especially as a child, when you are an academic child, you pride yourself on your academics. It's a large part of your identity, whether you like it or not, if you're a smart kid at school. And then you go to a university, and again, everyone is the smart kid at school, but, your professors assume that you're a smart person, that you're capable of everything. And so it was a really interesting, comparison entering the real world. And suddenly the thing that I've worn as, a large part of my identity, that, yeah, I'm a smart person, I can write code, is the thing that gets questioned. And based off of who's not being questioned about these things, I can only assume it's because of my gender? What about me doesn't look like someone with a physics degree? And I ask when investors say these sorts of things. And so, I think inevitably that there will be challenges. There's also quite a well-documented study, I think, by Harvard Business School about how women are spoken to in pitches, where they're disproportionately asked prevention questions and men are disproportionately asked promotion questions. So, again, these are all deep-rooted unconscious biases. And interestingly, women investors do the same to women founders. It's not just male investors that do this, which proves that it's not a conscious act of sexism or, most of it, racism, ageism. It's all very deep-rooted.
Yeah.
But again, it comes back to what I said earlier. I think the only way to get past it is just by being there, you are challenging that investor's viewpoint on what does a technical woman look like.
Exactly.
And so I think just by dealing with it, educating, trying to empathize in the sense that they're probably coming from a place of ignorance rather than actively wanting to discriminate. Yeah. And then be willing to go through that is the only way to solve the problem, I think.
No, absolutely. I think that this conversation really opens your eyes about the fact that I think people don't even realize, where these issues are stemming from. It's because maybe there's obviously a lack of representation, but the need of more young women to actually come up and, lead the way like you are leading, and which is exactly the problem we are trying to solve through this podcast as well. That maybe looking at you, people are going to be like, okay, if she can do it, I can do it too, or at least giving it a try. And obviously whatever the outcome is going to vary from person to person. But I think we definitely need more young women representing in science, tech, whichever field. To be honest, I come from a policy background and there's lesser representation of women even now in whatever work I do. So I think, this is just a call for every young woman out there to please, follow your dreams and, give it your best shot, because if you don't try, you don't know. And I think that also kind of leads me to another question about, obviously, I guess the challenges that we face as starting as an entrepreneur has its own kind of, stress to deal with. But especially there are multiple layers of challenges when we have, kind of lesser representation as young women coming from South Asia, and then being young as well. And something that I really like about your LinkedIn content is also how you consistently talk about the need for balancing with, taking care of your personal well-being along with building a startup. So, what would be sort of your tips and suggestions for some budding entrepreneurs?
Yeah, well, I think that side of the content came from the fact that I didn't realize that. I think that one founder told me I can outwork everyone else, and then I took that very literally, and for 2 years I outworked everyone else.
Wow.
And that caused health issues. And, touch wood, I was lucky that nothing irreversible or overly serious, but it was small things like I was falling ill all the time. My immune system was terrible because I was literally working 18-hour days, no weekends, no holidays for 2 years straight in the first 2 years of starting the company. And it's tough because I do not like glamorizing the grind. But I also have to acknowledge that it's bloody hard. It's really hard to start a company. And if you can achieve the same amount by working less, then kudos to you. But for me, it took a lot of work. And that was my reality. But what I realized about 2 years in is I actually love this job. Like, I have learned more from this job than I could possibly imagine. And I want this to be my career. I want to do this for the long term. If I am falling ill every 2 weeks with a cold or a flu or getting the worst allergies, whatever, I'm not going to be here for the long term. And I don't want to have to wind up in a hospital. And you hear these stories of clinical burnout that can be dangerous and can cause irreversible effects. And I thought, at this point I was just about to turn 24, I think. I was like, I'm too young to be feeling this old. And, other things as well, like I gained a lot of weight. And fortunately, my job doesn't depend on how I look. But I noticed, I go up the stairs and I'm panting, and I'm like, this is not normal, especially as someone who was sporty when I was young, and that was another big part of my identity. So, and then the final part of it is when you are the founder, you also realize that there's nobody looking out for you like a boss. When you have a normal job, you have whatever your 21, 28-day holiday allowance.
Yeah.
And for the most part, your manager might be like, oh, you have your holiday, why don't you take it? Or you have reason to take it.
They'll remind you to take care of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or if you come into work looking like you've not slept, people will ask, are you okay? Founders do not quite have that support system available.
It's a solo journey.
It is. And you know, I'm very fortunate. I have a very close family. You know, my parents, my brother, a very supportive partner, and they look out for me on a personal level, but at the same time, they know how hard I've had to work to get here. So if they see me working late into the night, they trust that I am making the right call. And as I said, for many nights, I had to work late into the night to get the job done. So, you know, they will look out for me and care for me, but they'll never tell me what to do or say, you must take care of yourself, you must impose this holiday, because they understand the trade-off that's being made. But because of that, I realized that just from a health perspective, again, I'm not going to be around long enough to enjoy all of the fruits of this labor if I don't actively take care of myself. Exactly. So I decided from that point that no, I need to be clear on what my life priorities are. My number one priority has always actually been my closest relationships, as I mentioned, with my family and partner. That's the one thing that even in the busiest times of work, I will never sacrifice, and I'm not willing to. I think for a long time, then it was work was number two, and those were the only two things I cared about. A year and a half ago, I made that conscious decision that actually, even above my work, I'm going to put my family first, my health second, and my work third. Don't get me wrong, my work is still above my social life. It's above my hobbies. It's above almost everything else. But I am extremely intentional about my health. So in the same way that I schedule meetings, I will schedule my exercise. I schedule my sleep. I schedule my food. Because for years I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I didn't exercise. And, you know, it sounds so cliche about how I feel better and how I'm doing more. I certainly feel better. Doing more is hard to say, because I do think I achieved a lot when I was grinding it out. But I don't think my achievement has slowed down or stagnated since I've taken a more balanced approach. And doing things this way, I feel so happy in my mind, in my body. I feel like I can do this for the long haul. And it also sets the example to my team that I want to have, because even when I was working these crazy hours, I never wanted the people around me to do that because I was looking out for them. But it is hard as a leader if you're not leading by example.
Of course.
And there's still things that I could do to improve. For example, I still work weekends most of the time. I don't expect that of my team. But, you know, I will also say, if you want to do your workout class at lunchtime, do it. You know, if you need to reschedule this meeting that's like not that important because it's either you exercise or you get an extra hour of sleep because you're sleep deprived or whatever, I would rather you take care of yourself if it's not going to have a massive impact on your work in the company. So I think just it all comes down to values and alignment, and I just decided that no one else is going to take care of my health for me. It is my responsibility, and so I take my health as seriously as I take my job.
Wow, and that's some really concrete advice for a lot of young people, whether you are in jobs, you know, working the corporate hustle or building a startup. I think taking care of yourself, prioritizing your health, your relationships is what keeps you going, with what, you know, makes you and your idea sustainable.
Yeah, so, and even when it comes to success and happiness, what I realized is with every accolade you listed off on, you know, in the introduction, from achieving those things, I realized none of them bring me happiness personally. Maybe they might bring someone else happiness, but I think I built the self-awareness that my happiness does not stem from a one-off celebration. My happiness stems from my day-to-day of living true to my values. I actually feel much happier when I've got to the end of the day and I've, you know, called my mum, I've had a good session at the gym, and I had a great day at work. It doesn't come from closing a funding round or this or the other. And maybe that's a separate issue and I need to get better at celebrating big wins. But, you know, I would rather optimize for every day rather than the one-offs, because you can't control the outcome. You can't control when these big things are going to happen. And these big things happen as the result of years of grinding every day.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, I think, again, it is different for everyone, but knowing that my definition of success does not stem from company achievements, for the very reason that as soon as you achieve one thing with your work, the goalpost will move. I closed my funding round, but it wasn't woohoo, like I raised $1 million, like I can celebrate. No, it was now I need to hire the right people.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so
yeah.
just by definition, if you associate your own happiness with company milestones, you will never be happy because the goalposts will keep moving.
Yeah.
So you have to find what makes you happy. And for me, I know that that's my family and my health, and hence I prioritize things that way.
Amazing. That's truly inspiring. And I think just moving on to a couple of last questions before we do a quick rapid fire round with you. Any advice to, let's say, a 17 to 21-year-old listening to this conversation who has a startup idea, wants to do something impactful, but doesn't know where to start?
I would say learn as much as you possibly can. You cannot control the outcome. You don't know if your idea is going to succeed, fail, and there are so many variables that go into success ultimately. But the thing that, if you adopt the mindset that if you go into this to learn, then you literally cannot fail because you will learn something by the end of it. What I would say though is I think that age is a perfect age to also learn at somebody else's expense. And what I mean by that is internships.
Yeah.
I am not an advocate of putting your whole life savings as a young person into an idea, because the truth is most companies fail. And then what?
It's a fact.
So I think that if you can afford to take that risk, if you have the financial backing to do it. There's a great position to be in. Most people don't. I wasn't in that position, which is why I had to secure those graduate jobs, and I needed some funding before I could make this my job. So you shouldn't feel ashamed if you can't make your company your full-time job, or you can't afford to leave everything to jump on it. No, that stems from a place of privilege, and you do what you can given your circumstances. But what you can control is the amount that you learn in that time. And what I'm really proud of myself, especially in that age bracket, for doing was learning. And for me, that looked like internships. I learned what a job as a software engineer was like. I learned what a job as a banker was like, as a consultant, a hedge. I applied to everything, literally everything. I was on LinkedIn chronically, like an illness, messaging people in all fields, just asking to learn about their job, learn about their work. And that's how I built up the self-awareness of what is important to me, what are my values, what environment do I like, what do I not like, where am I going to thrive, where am I going to learn the most. And then when it came to starting my own company, I had learned so much in these other environments where, if I have a bad day at work, the Morgan Stanley's not going to fail, right?
Of course.
Whereas
it'll still have employees to keep it running.
Exactly. Whereas if you put everything into a startup from day one, again, you'll learn amazing things. So I'm not saying don't jump on your idea. Do it, but also learn at somebody else's expense. Because if you put everything into one thing and it fails, which it can, then, it has a bigger impact on your life than, you're doing an internship and by the end of it, you've learned a lot. And even if that learning is you don't like it, you have still learned something from it. So I would say be open to opportunities, meet as many people as you can as well. I learned the hard way that network does matter.
Yeah.
Go to events, talk to people, get used to not knowing anybody in a room, and build up that skill of just being able to walk over to someone and awkwardly just say, hey, do you mind if I join you?
Yeah.
Because you never know who you'll meet, you'll never know how they can help you, or you can help them. But it's also such an important skill to just have that open-mindedness, to have the ability to communicate.
Yeah.
And while you're at university or in studies and you're young, I think that's the best place to do it, because everyone expects that you're in that learning phase of life. So yeah, I think don't be afraid to ask for things. Don't be afraid of rejection and failure. Again, not every person you reach out to on LinkedIn asking for a coffee chat will say yes.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. The only thing within your control is reaching out to more people. So do it, and don't be afraid of hearing no.
Perfect. That's really, really amazing. Okay, with that, we're going to do a quick 1 minute of a rapid fire round.
Okay.
We'll keep this really short, so just one quick word answers, and that's about it.
Okay.
Ready?
I think so.
It'll be chill, don't worry. So, one word your friends would use to describe you.
Disciplined.
Amazing, love that. Most used app on your phone.
Obviously, Clear.
This is your chance to market it. Your go-to productivity hack.
Time blocking, my calendar.
Nice, a good time management skill. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Night owl.
If you weren't a founder, what would you be doing today?
Astronaut.
Oh, interesting.
That was actually my original career dream.
Oh, is it?
And it's not too late, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. You never know. One thing you still want to learn this year?
more, this is going to sound so boring, B2B sales.
Oh, we all need that.
It sounds
masterclass on that.
so boring, but like that is what's next for 𝐶LIA, and so that's what I'm going to have to learn more this year.
Amazing. And in one line, your leadership mantra.
So it comes back to my point about resilience. Don't be afraid of rejection and failure. If you're hearing no, it's testament to the fact that what you're doing is hard, and that's where the learning and growth happens. So don't fear rejection. Expect it as a part of doing anything where you're pushing yourself and learning and growing.
Wonderful. Well, with that, it comes to such a beautiful wrap up of a very clear conversation we have had on leadership skills and everything that a budding entrepreneur should be looking at, or at least thinking about if you are about to start your new venture. So thank you so much, Ahana, for your time and for your words of wisdom, which I'm sure is going to be incredibly helpful for the whole community of young people around the world who will be tuning into this conversation. I've had a fantastic time listening and learning from you in the past 30 or 40 minutes that we've spoken so far. So yeah, I wish you all the best with 𝐶LIA and a very bright future ahead. You've done amazing things, and I'm sure you're going to reach for the stars going ahead.
Thank you. It was lovely to chat with you, and appreciate you having me on your podcast.
Thank you so much.